Your next vehicle from Community Motors of Mason City.
Great service from 3 locations: Community on Monroe, Community Motors Westside, and Mason City Ford. 10 new franchises and hundreds of vehicles to give you more choices. Plus, Community offers an exclusive 3-3 warranty on pre-owned vehicles and 10-year, 250,000-mile warranty on new. Need more reasons why? Stop or visit CommunityAutoGroup.com.
Because nobody beats a community deal.
4 p.m. up at City Hall. Let the record reflect all council members are present. Do we have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, well, we'll start with item number 1, which is consideration of sanitation proposals, and we'll let Mr. Trout go.
All right. I sent to the council a memo and supporting documents relative to the sanitation RFP that was sent out. Through that process, we ended up having 2 letters back, not declining to actually bid on the RFP. We had one that we received that had a few suggestions as far as how they would take the RFP versus the actual what was in the proposal or what was required to be. I documented those differences in the memo, and it identifies primarily the one was the pickup if it was a miss, the percent of increase that's allowed per year for rates, the exception, let's see, the schedule change were the ones that I specifically have an issue. Now they also had 4 others that they recommended consideration of different language, which we thought that did not materially change the level of service and so therefore could be allowed. So from that, the biggest concern that I had referenced it was the issue of their pursuit, the item relative to the increase per year. You know, we had some discussion relative to the fact that we've looked at roughly a 1% increase over a 10-year period. We went back and looked, Kevin and I did again today, at what we've been looking at for increases. And it's probably was a bit of a misnomer to say 1%, but it is definitely not cost of living increase. I mean, the CPI or inflation, whatever term you want to use. Our increase has been below that. We had a period of 3 years where we did not raise rates at all, and then there were a couple other years where we didn't from previous rates. So we've had a number of years where we haven't. And if you look at in the current projections that we have, based on expenditures, we don't expect there to need to be an increase in rates in 2014 or 2015 as we go forward, based on our capital improvement purchase projections. It does show our next consideration for an increase would be in 2016. The obvious thing being, though, is that if we don't make a capital purchase, if we're able to push any capital purchase out a year, we wouldn't need to make an increase for an additional year. So that would be 4 years where we would be holding the rates the same. So from the standpoint of the 1%, after further review, I think it's probably was a misnomer to say 1%, but also I say we're doing better than the cost of living increases as far as our rate increase. But a number of the other things, item 14, which was dealt with collection, they were looking at a 5-day collection schedule. We specified 4 days. That probably is not a deal killer, but it also is from the standpoint, it is an issue. Most people like the route system we have now. And when we bid it, we said we wanted it bid exactly like we do it now. So that their suggestion would not meet the expectations of what we're trying to do. So I don't know how much more detail. I mean, I wrote all this, so I don't know how much more detail you can cover.
Mr. Arquist.
Well, first, thanks for the staff report. I'd like to ask the sanitation workers to give me just a little bit of rope You may not like the path that I had down, but I think you're going to like the final destination, so just be patient with me. Thank you to Absolute Waste for actually turning something in that's tangible. Without the work that you did, it would be very difficult for us to have a discussion today around any kind of real information. So thanks for the work that you did. In a nutshell, we're basically at Absolute Waste right now at 890, and we know that we're doing this with city services at 960. I would agree with the assessment from several of the third-party service providers that 960 isn't all-inclusive, but I don't know that that really makes a difference, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. Some of the difficulties that I had, well, I'll back up one step. I didn't see this as a step. If you think back to the last meeting that we had, I didn't see this as a step where we accept or reject anything that came before us. What we chose to do was minimize the amount of staff time and keep the sanitation department out of a position where they had to put a lot of effort into generating a proposal. And this was basically a feeler that we were putting out to see if it was even worth doing a full-blown RFP. So this was not a full-blown RFP. I never would have considered accepting any proposal because the sanitation department never had a chance to turn in a proposal. If indeed we were interested in the Absolute Waste proposal or any others that would have come before us, I think that would have lent ourselves towards a full-blown RFP so that the sanitation department could compete. So I don't see this as an acceptance or a rejection, but I think we have enough information, at least in my opinion, to move forward or not. Some of the issues that I had, and I don't like the word issues, but some of the things I didn't like about the Absolute Waste proposal was I guess let me put it a different way. I like doing the 4-day pickup. It works really well with holidays. It's a built-in safety factor for holidays, and I like that. The percent increase is kind of an interesting item to talk about because on the one hand, if you stop and think about it, we do collective bargaining agreements that build in 2 to 3% increases on an annual basis, and yet for the foreseeable past, we've had 1% increases in sanitation. Well, how can that be? If labor is our biggest expense and we've got 2 to 3% increases built into labor, how are we able to hold sanitation to around 1%? And what I'm understanding, and I haven't talked with Kevin directly, but what I'm understanding from conversations that I have had, and Kevin, I'm sure you can catch me if I misspeak, please, we had a cushion. There was a point in time where sanitation department was a significant moneymaker. It's not so much anymore, and we've burned through our cushion. We've still got a little bit of cushion left that is evident in the fact that we don't forecast a rate increase until 2016. But at some point in time, that cushion's going to be gone. Why is that cushion disappearing and why it's going to go away? I can only surmise. But we know our biggest expense, not only in sanitation, but across our city departments, is labor. And the two biggest factors that we have absolutely no control over in labor are the cost of insurance premiums and the cost of retirement. Those are escalating faster than the rate of inflation, and local government has absolutely no control over those costs, especially medical expenses. And that has had a significant impact on us burning through the cushion that we've had, and it's only a matter of time before that cushion is gone, and one of two things is going to have to happen. We're going to have to start raising rates more in line with inflation, more in the 2 to 3, maybe 4% range, or we're going to have to look for a place to cut services, either in sanitation or somewhere else across city budgets so that we can maintain status quo. So it's only a matter of time before we're going to have to pay the piper. I think one of the solutions to the problem will be through the collective bargaining process, our bargaining units to pick up more of what our citizens consider a fair share of health insurance premiums. A share that's more in line with what the private sector pays. I do not see this process as an opportunity to reopen that discussion because we just approved a collective bargaining agreement, and I've said it many times, I have no problem with that agreement. It was fair in light of what's going on across the state right now. But I think it's only a matter of time before, all you gotta do is look at the front page of today's Globe Gazette, where they're looking at a potential to save, what, $116 million if state workers would pick up 20% of insurance premiums. So anyway, I think that's the bigger problem that we have on down the road. It's not a problem that has to be addressed right now. I was not excited, although it was creative, I was not excited about absolute waste using the city department, finance department to basically bill. On the one hand, it's really creative because the tools are in place and we're doing that right now anyway. The bigger concern that I would have is if citizens see the billing, even though it's a private company providing the service, if they see it on a city bill and they have an issue, they're going to be calling City Hall. They're going to hold City Hall accountable because that's where their bill's coming from. And so I think we would need to be at a point where we're either doing the whole thing or we're doing none of it. That's just my personal opinion. Now, if we're trying to compare apples to apples, I'm assuming that you would have to hire somebody to do billing. I'm assuming that would be, for purposes around numbers, at least a $33,000 expense. That works well because we've got 11,000 households, so that's $3 per household, which is roughly 25 cents per month, which means $8.90 turns into somewhere around $9.15. On the flip side, the folks that we got felt like $9.60 should include more staff assessments. For example, none of your time is charged to the $9.60. Pretty much just Stangler, is that right?
Correct.
And then direct managers. I would agree that if you're comparing apples to apples, it would be appropriate to have those prorated costs in there. However, if we were getting to a point in time that we were actually going to seriously consider going to an outside company, I'd want to strip those costs right back out. And the reason is, take Stangler for example, and say 25% of his workday is devoted to sanitation, and assume for the sake of discussion he's $100,000 a year. That's the right ballpark. That's $25,000. Again, if that was added into the 960, or I'm one step ahead of myself. If we were going to get rid of sanitation, I don't see to where we would be cutting Stangler's pay, because we still need the department head. In my guesstimation, he's adding about 16 cents of the 960, if you figure 25% of his time, which means the figure would be somewhere down around, what, 934, 944? You know, and so we're really to a point where we know that we're within 50 cents to a dollar, looking at the two numbers. And to me, there's just not a will in the community for $12 a year to make a change. I'm a customer of the city service as well, and we've got good service, we've got good people, and at $12 a year, it's just not worth messing around with. I think it was a valuable process to go through so that we could really understand, rather than all this kind of pie in the sky stuff that we've talked about for years. And I think it was a healthy exercise to go through as we're learning how to look hard at departments and consider opportunities for cost reductions without damaging services. But at the end of the day, I think we need to maintain status quo. Now, that is not to say that at some point in the future, 2016, 2018, 2020, you know, if health insurance premiums continue to do what they're doing, I think that the taxpayers are probably going to drive this decision, and maybe at that point in time, if they're putting the council or decision makers in a position where they're screaming to hold the line on tax increases, it's something that will have to be looked at hard again. But right now, we're only talking $12 for the average taxpayer, and it's just not worth messing around with, in my opinion. So I should probably give other people a chance to talk.
That's fair. Anybody else? Mr. King?
Thank you, Mayor. I've talked a lot about this issue over the past few months. We've been talking about it, and I can talk till I'm blue in the face about the reasons why I'm opposed to it. One thing I just wanted to point out quickly, if you read the packet closely, in one of the rejection letters from one of the haulers saying, given their reasons to not bid, there's a line here that says, "It is clear that the council does not have an appetite for seriously moving forward with this issue and is content with the status quo." At the last meeting, I laid out all the reasons why I don't believe this is status quo. I think these gentlemen continue to always look for efficiencies and improvements in the processes, the way that they work. And again, all those extemporaneous effects of, if we did move ahead and bring someone else in, said maybe we saved $12 a year per person, but there's many, many, many more negative effects in my mind. Potentially putting 12 people on unemployment, people that buy goods and services in our community, the quality of service that we know, and maintaining that those very small increases over a decade. There's a lot of those things that aren't in that 960 fee that versus the 864 that there's a lot that you can't see on a spreadsheet there that is of value to me and people that have corresponded with me throughout the community. But I don't want to talk too much about this. I think we've put some specifications out there in an RFP, and we got one response that doesn't meet what we laid out, and this is going to end here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Ms. Silver.
I would just like some clarification on this for the $9.60 per month. I'm getting some questions. Scott mentioned earlier there's approximately 11,000 households that get billed the $9.60.
Correct.
Okay, so does that all include all of the truck expense, all of the insurance expense, all the gasoline costs, all the health costs, all the payroll costs, all the IFR costs? That $9.60 is inclusive of absolutely everything that department entails.
I have the budget, and it includes all those safety shoes, the driver's license expenses, their own expense, contract labor, radio maintenance, anything related. Gas and electric is charged relative to their building, building insurance, uniform rental, workers' comp, copy charges, professional services, machine equipment supplies, community cleanup charges, supplies and laundry. I mean, it's exhaustive. It's everything that they do is charged back to their account.
Because when I see the expense of like $150,000 for a truck or different things like that, it just,
Right, and that's charged back to the account too. You're saving up money, and then from the excess revenues, the reserve that's created, we then make the purchase. And that was something that was started, I believe, I remember, Kevin, it was about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, we went to buying with cash rather than borrowing. Longer than that. So that's kind of what our method of operation has changed to, where we're buying the equipment with reserves, building the reserves up, and then buying the equipment rather than borrowing for it.
okay, because that's then where we get, if we go over, we pull out of that particular reserve fund then?
The sanitation reserve, right, which, we're projected to be about 153,000 this year in our reserve, which will then pay for the recycling truck that needs to be purchased. So we have the funds available to make that purchase that was put into the budget for this year, so we're ready to buy that with the funds that we have on hand in the account.
Is there another fund that we're grabbing to make the budget meet, though, when we work at the beginning of the year? Is there another, like, sewer fund or anything like that that we're grabbing anything from? Okay. That's all for right now, thanks.
Anybody else? Mr. Ray.
I agree with pretty much everything that's Councilman Hornquist and Councilman Kuhn have said. My one question in going through the process, and we asked for a 1% for 10 years. Now, are we going to hold ourselves to that same standard?
Intention is yes.
And here's my question that absolutely threw out there was if fuel goes to $4.50 a gallon, tipping fees go up, insurance, health insurance premiums, and wage increases, are we still going to be able to maintain that standard that we were going to put on them if they would have bid the process?
Well, I think that we have. I think that for the most part, and I'd have to ask Kevin for a little more background, but from what I've been able to find in the discussions that I've had, we do not add a surcharge. We look at other areas that we can cut back within that particular fund in order to cover any additional fuel costs that we have. Then at the end of the year, if there is a shortage, it comes out of reserves, which then impacts our decisions as we look at what equipment we're going to buy and when we're going to be able to buy it.
So when you say reserves, what reserve are you
The sanitation funds reserve itself. So running it really as a business, and we are trying to take everything, we have every expense that was mentioned as far as some of the managers, as far as HR, finance, and myself and their assistants, we take all items that relate to sanitation out of this fund. And there have been years, I guess I'd ask Kevin to say as far as whether there have been how many years we've not made budget, but I know that we have addressed, whenever the fuel costs have gone up, we have worked within the fund to try and address that, watching what we're doing with some of the other expense areas. Not a lot of room to play in this budget as you look at it with the expenses. Fuel is a major factor, but we, in the past, based off of what Scott Brattrud and others have said, as we work within the fund to try and affect having the funds we need to offset additional fuel charges.
And my next question is, and I know we're on a fund accounting system, so to speak, like with your wages and benefits and stuff, I know like percentage comes out of the golf course fund
Right.
and things like that. How come yours isn't spread out across every department equally?
When I got here, I looked at doing that as far as we had some different budget issues that we had. And the previous council, their decision was they didn't want to do that. And so it was brought forward as a potential option, because that's what I remember. I presented it. It wasn't during your tenure. We haven't done that. It is one of those things that Kevin and I have had on our list as potential options should we end up with issues relative to the budget in the future. If general fund dollars are short, that is something that is commonly done. Oftentimes, cities have waited to do that until they absolutely need to. The decision has been to use the general fund as long as you need to before you reach into those water, sewer, and so forth. It's usually been a need-based type thing where they've gone and done that. Some have been set up that way for a long time. When I was in Boone, that was what was done. I was in Eagle Grove, we split those things out. And so it's been done in many other places, but it was really a need type thing. We got to the point where the budget wasn't capable of handling all the salary for myself and others that worked and assisted those other funds, so that we made the decision to actually charge those. Nothing precludes us from doing that now. It's just not something that we.
Now, is that the same thing for like human resources?
Sure. Yes,
And
any
things like that?
any staff that I have that does specific things across their functions, reach across each of the different types of funds that we have. Addressing HR is a good one. It addresses employees from each of the different funds. Finance is a good example because they're handling the monies for each of those funds. So all of those could be split out. The thing that happens, though, part of this also, for example, if we were to go after moving some of my salary over to the water fund, well, then we're probably going to look at raising water rates in order to cover that. And so it ends up having an impact on the other funds, and so that type of decision has impacted, or that type of issue has impacted the decision to just keep it within the water fund.
Then you could possibly lower the sanitation fund.
Yes.
Or other fund, because then you're kind of penalizing, and I'm just gonna use the golf course, because that's the example
Yeah.
I use. That fund or area might be getting penalized because your benefits and wages are being pulled out of there, but they're not being distributed, so to speak, in different areas.
Agreed.
It's not a true number, is what I'm trying to say.
Agreed, and that is one of the things that, this last budget year we moved what was being removed from the golf course budget from 10 to 5, because we realized that truly the amount of time that I was spending addressing golf course issues was reduced, and in the future it may be reduced further depending on the decision we make. But all of those funds probably, I address, touch, whatever you want to call, issues related to all of those funds at some point during my time. We do that with the city engineer and Bill Stangler right now, and there's some others that Kevin has the whole list, but we do it with a number of different people. We've just never done it with relates to the city administrator, human resources, or finance. But, well, Kevin's is there a portion? No, we've not.
My assistant is, but.
Okay. So there have been a number that we have done, but there are others that could be done that way. And sometimes you look at it and it says it makes sense that we go ahead and do that.
Sure. That's all I have right now.
I think the interesting thing about that is, though, is you did bring that forward at one point in time for the previous council to consider, and they chose not to do it. But we have those enterprise funds, and by not having those costs, because that's what they are essentially in there, you're supplementing those enterprise funds with general fund dollars. And as Mr. Trout well knows, I personally have an issue with that.
Yeah, we talked about it.
I think that the taxpayers should have a right to know exactly what they're paying, whether it's for water or for It doesn't matter what it is. They should know what it is and what pieces are in there, because those enterprise funds have the ability to tax for that essentially business unit, and that should be reflected when they tax. That should be reflected, as opposed to letting yourself, and I'm not saying like the city or that business unit look good because we've been supplementing it somewhere else in our tax dollars. So I hope we do continue to look forward to that. And I know cities have chosen not to do that, but I typically think that a lot of the reason they've done that is to artificially keep rates low in some of their enterprise funds, so they can get votes, as opposed to being transparent and showing the taxpayers what they actually are. Most businesses don't run that way, and I don't know why we would either. So just my little soapbox on that issue. Anybody else?
Can you share with the group the conversation you and I have been having about claims, medical claims?
Sure.
And how we account for that now?
Right now, the city is self-funded when it comes to medical insurance. And so the actual cost that we have for all these medical bills.
We'll be dealing with those rising costs and that we're going to have to address, keeping that in mind all the time. So I appreciate everybody doing what they did, the absolute.
Well, in the comment that I would have on that is I'm actually in discussion, and it's not a serious discussion, we're trying to work through this, but there are changes that are occurring in the way sanitation is handled. There are even waste management. They use the one driver with the arm and they pick up and dump. You know, you require dumpsters and a lot of other things. The city of Fort Dodge is in the process of analyzing whether, and they're actually made the decision, they're going to go to that kind of a system very soon. And I've been talking with the city manager there and looking at getting his pro forma as to what type of expenses do you have to get into that kind of a business. What's your payback time? How long is it going to take to get there? And so my intention is that we continue to look at what other options are out there. We've made the decision on where we're at. His process to implement that was 3+ years. You know, he started looking at it, got to the point that he, through attrition, has working it down to where people that are retiring, they're not being hired back. And so that they get to the point where eventually they get to the employment level, and then they would buy the trucks and implement it so that nobody's losing their job, and that we're establishing a system that takes a change in how they do business to be more efficient. So I think that's the type of thing that I still need to do, and I think that's what I have you guys, is to continue to look for options like that.
Good. Glad to hear that.
Oh, yeah. Mr.
I'll join in real quick. Again, I think the process has merit, and I think that's what we need to do as city council, is look for ways to save money. And like I said, last meeting, I was at the point of let's end this thing, but the process itself is needed, is what we need to do. And I think the dialogue just last 10-15 minutes about 2016 and some information I wasn't thinking about, that we do need to be looking down the road 3, 4, 5 years. And I think if this process did that, then it was definitely worth it. And that's what I think what we try to do here. But I think this is definitely the end of this discussion about privatizing it for the next couple of years. But I think what you just said is something we have to follow through on, and be. If it's going to be a 3.5 year, and 3.5 years puts us at 2016, it's about the right timing we're looking at. So I'm looking forward to putting this end and stopping some of these phone calls.
Anybody else? On my own personal note, I'll say I think this is an incredibly healthy dialogue for us to have, for the staff, for you folks, for the waste companies, etc. It is very healthy. We have to, these people that sit up here, they have to go back and look our taxpayers in the face and say that we justify what we're doing. And it doesn't matter what the area, we need to be looking at it all the time, and it's good that we were able to show that they can go through a process and work it through, and it's not an agenda. It's not, hey, let's just do this to do it. We go through the process, and what the answer is the answer. So I thank everybody that's been involved, and I appreciate it.